Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my monthly You Choose the Deck request queue. Thanks to NickVal_ for requesting this commander. If you have a commander you'd like to see me build around, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic. As you see, today our commander is Toph, Hardheaded Teacher. This is Toph taking on her first role in Team Avatar, teaching Aang how to Earthbend. It's a great sequence that shows off the differences both in these characters and in the philosophies behind their bending forms. The indirect and confrontational nature of Earthbending is diametric from the reactive and indirect qualities of airbending, and since Aang grew up as an airbender, his inclination is to approach every new problem obliquely. But that's exactly the wrong way to learn Earthbending, and Toph goes on to show us how her head-on mentality arises from her bending in the same way that Aang's does from his own. That's what gives this card its epithet, so now you know. I go into Toph's character more deeply in my Toph the First Metalbender deck, linked in this video's description, but I'm excited to show you what I put together for this version of her. Before we get started, however, let's go over our deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why the card is so cool and why I thought to build a deck around it. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander. Toph, Hardheaded Teacher is a 3/4 legendary human warrior ally for 2, a red and a green, that says when Toph enters, you may discard a card. If you do, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And whenever you cast a spell, that's any spell at all, Earthbend 1. If that spell is a lesson, put an additional +1/+1 counter on that land. And remember, to Earthbend, we take target land that we control, and it becomes a 0/0 creature with haste, that is still a land, and we put a 1/1 counter on it. That's the Earthbend value. And then when that land will die or be exiled, we return it to the battlefield tapped. So why does Toph's second ability care about lessons? Because she's Aang's teacher. That's why her enters ability lets us discard a card to get back an instant or sorcery, so that we can cast a lesson before Toph comes out, then get that lesson back in order to empower our Earthbending when we teach that lesson again. Learning is about repetition, which is what makes her second ability so powerful. Turning our lands into creatures every time we cast any spell, that's like saying each of our spells comes with a token if we are Earthbending a land for the first time, or with a counter if we're targeting an already Earthbent land. It's sort of like a mass, but way better. It's also sort of like having a commander that gives us a free kicker every time we cast any spell, which is just a way of saying Toph rewards us for playing the game. That makes sense to me. The only way to master a new skill is to do it over and over, so she helps us make a single step of progress every time we put in the effort. We might not be able to take that step without her tutelage, but Earthbending is flexible enough to go wide or tall, so later lessons build on earlier ones. We just have to keep trying. Learning is about repetition. So at its essence, the goal of our deck is just to play Magic. We have a host of inexpensive spells that we can use to turn our land base into a legion once our teacher hits the board. We also have a lot of repeatable ramp to supplement our creature count and plenty of card advantage to keep our hand full so that we can keep Earthbending. But the value Toph gives us for simply playing the game is our baseline. So we're not just running whatever spells we can cast, we're taking advantage of that value. After all, Earthbending gives us free creatures with solid stats, haste, and the ability to return to the battlefield as lands whenever they die or go to exile. So we have a plethora of payoffs for all of these actions. Cards that care about counters or otherwise pump our creatures. Cards that trigger when our creatures die. Cards that return other cards from the graveyard if they don't come back on their own from Earthbending. Cards that let us sacrifice our lands and creatures to get those Earthbending triggers. Cards that let us swing in with Evasion and Impunity. Cards that protect our board and ourselves. And of course, Landfall. So much Landfall. Our game plan takes inspiration from Toph's card design. We play as much Magic as we can and reap the rewards as we go. Sometimes our sequencing can be a little unexpected, but like Earthbending, our approach is mostly straightforward. Our attacks come frequently because, unlike our opponents, we aren't risking anything if our land creatures die. Either they hurt the defending player, or they hurt and hopefully trade with any blockers they encounter, which just returns them to the lower half of our playmat and gives us any of our many accompanying triggers. Our aggressive focus might make us a target, but our synergistic permanents keep our threats growing. We can hold back if need be, appearing to shore up our defenses, but that's just us sandbagging in another sense. Before our opponents know it, they'll be ground to dust under our avalanche of awakened attackers, giving us a chance to quote Toph from the Season 2 episode Bitter Work. If you're not tough enough to stop the rock, you can at least give it the pleasure of smushing you. You'll enjoy this deck if you like accumulating resources and using them in unexpected ways. After all, not all lands tap for combat damage. Or if you like the idea of getting progressively stronger as your practice makes you perfect. After all, learning is about repetition. So this Mox field list we're going over today, as usual, is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section, filled with cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which didn't make the cut for me. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, even though our budget today is pretty low, if you have an interest in what I've done here and you want to kind of go harder into it, for example, I am not running the infinite combo with Toph Hardheaded Teacher that you can get with Springheart and Tuco. If you're interested in doing that kind of thing, maybe that's a good place for you to begin. Or if you just have an interest in this commander and you like some of the things I've done and you want to get more ideas for your own version of it, that considering section is a good place to begin when you build your own Toph Hardheaded Teacher deck. So let's begin. We're going to go to our biggest section, which is our Landfall section. These are all cards that give us value when we have lands enter the battlefield, whether from us playing them for our land drop or for a ramp spell, or because they've come back into play thanks to their delayed trigger from Earthbending. We're going to start with a new one from the recent Marvel Superheroes, I guess recent as of time of recording, set. This is Killmonger on Claim the Kingdom. 1 and a green for a plan enchantment with Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we put a 1/1 counter on target creature we control and a plan counter on this enchantment. Plan counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by this card. And when the 4th plan counter is put on this enchantment, we sacrifice Claim the Kingdom, and when we do, we put an indestructible counter on target creature we control. We of course want to put this on Toph. We want to make it so that it's impossible for anyone to remove her with destroy or combat damage effects. Obviously she can still be bounced or still be exiled, but an indestructible counter isn't bad, especially when it comes from getting 4 1/1 counters total on our other creatures or maybe on Toph herself. Next we have Colony Heart Expedition, a very similar enchantment to the last one. 1 and a green gives us an enchantment with Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we may put a quest counter on this enchantment. This is a may. We don't have to do it. We don't have that option on Claim the Kingdom, but we do on the Expedition. So we may put a quest counter on this enchantment. Again, quest counters just used by the enchantment without any other meaning mechanically. And whenever we want, we can remove 3 quest counters from this enchantment and sacrifice the enchantment to search our library for 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is a great way, after we have made 3 land drops with Colony Heart Expedition in play, to instant speed Explosive Vegetation, which is that search for 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So that's a great way for us to get a surprise double landfall trigger whenever we need it. Seems good. Plus, of course, it puts those lands into play for us so that we can untap with them during our next untap step and use them for mana, or earthbend them. Next we have Sabotender. This is from the Final Fantasy set, and I am not a Final Fantasy guy, so let me know in the comments what the deal is with this little cactus friend. Maybe it's a sea cucumber on land? Don't really know. Anyway, it's 1 and a red for a 2/1 plant with reach. It also has Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So a little bit of bonus burn for us whenever we make our Landfall triggers, of which we have plenty in this deck. And for only 2 mana. Love to be able to run these cheap spells because they all trigger Toph. But Earthbender Ascension does it all for us. This card is incredible. It's 2 and a green for an enchantment that says when it enters, we Earthbend 2. So we do all of the things we do with Toph, but we put 2 1/1 counters on whichever land we've chosen. So either we're going to Earthbend a second land, because obviously when this goes on the stack after we cast it, Toph is going to trigger, assuming she's already in play. And that's going to let us put a 1/1 counter on one of our lands and make it into a 0/0 creature with haste if it's not already one. And then this will enter, we will Earthbend 2, and we can put 2 counters on a different land and make it a creature as well, or we can put those counters on one of our lands that's already been Earthbent and just get 2 more counters on it. Good either way. And then, after that happens, even while this is still getting its interest trigger, we then get to search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So it comes with a free rampant growth after we Earthbend too. And that's all for 3 mana, and that's not the end of it, because it also has a landfall trigger. Whenever a land we control enters, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. Same kind of counters as we saw with Colony Heart Expedition, again, no inherent mechanical meaning. And when we put that counter on it, if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, we put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control, and it gains trample until end of turn. So the idea behind this, of course, is once we hit our 4th quest counter, every time we get a quest counter on it, including that 4th one, it comes with a +1/+1 counter and temporary trample for whatever creature we want, which could be one of our lands. So ultimately, Earthbender Ascension comes in for 3, gives us a 2/2 at the very least, and a land, which triggers itself, so we only need to put 2 more lands on, or get 2 more lands into play before every land we put in play puts a counter on something and gives it trample. Similarly to the way that Claim the Kingdom, for at least the first 4 land drops we make, puts a counter on something. Neat. Evolution Sage is next. This doesn't directly put counters on our things, but it multiplies the counters that we have. For 2 and a green, we get a 3/2 Elf Druid with Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we proliferate. Proliferate means we get to choose any number of permanents. They don't even have to be ours, but of course, any of the permanents we have that have counters on them, we are going to choose. Or we can choose players as well, and or players. And then we give each permanent and player we've chosen an additional counter of every kind they already have. We don't get to choose the specific counters. So for example, if we have a creature that has a 1/1 counter on it, but someone has stunned it, put a stun counter on it, if we proliferate on that creature, we're going to put an additional 1/1 counter and an additional stun counter. We don't get to pick and choose the types of counters, just the particular permanents and or players that we're choosing. So if a player has experience counters and poison counters, proliferating on them gives them one of both of those, one of each different type. So Evolution Sage is here to make it so every time we have a land enter, we get to, at the very least, put an extra 1/1 counter on all of our creatures that already have 1/1 counters on them, which every one of our Earthbent lands will have. It's also the case that proliferating can proliferate up our quest counters on Earthbender Ascension, or on Colony Heart Expedition, or on Claim the Kingdom. But notably, Claim the Kingdom, if we put a quest counter on it, it will not put a 1/1 counter, because the 1/1 counters arrive when we have Landfall happen. Landfall triggers the counter and the plan counter, or the 1/1 counter and the plan counter. It's not the other way around. Similarly with Earthbender Ascension, we can put more quest counters on it, but if that puts it to more than 4 quest counters, that doesn't come with a 1/1 counter and trample. It just gives more quest counters, so that our later Landfall will give more 1/1 counters and trample. So yeah, Evolution Sage is a great way to pump up our whole team if our team is getting counters on them, and many of them are. Scoot Swarm is next, one of our more expensive cards in the deck, but totally worth it. This is 2 and a green for a 1/1 insect with Landfall. When a land we control enters, we make a 1/1 green insect creature token. But if we control 6 or more lands, which means if that land that came in was our 6th land or our later, or greater than that, then instead we make a token that's a copy of the Scoot Swarm. Which means that we would have 2 Scoot Swarms in play. So the next time a land comes in, they both trigger, and now we have 4 Scoots in play, the original and 3 copies. The next one that comes in, we now have 8 Scoots in play. You see how it goes. Scoot Swarm is a must-remove threat on a lot of tables, and so it makes it into a nice version of kind of removal bait. For only 3 mana, even if we get this out early, we're still at least making some insect tokens, which isn't nothing, but if we get it out when we're able to take advantage of the second half of its trigger, our opponents are going to get pretty upset about the idea of having to deal with so many little Scoots, because they really get out of hand. Next up is Tannoch Memorial Ensign. It's another burn effect for us. 1 a red and a green for a 2/4 legendary Kavu pilot with Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, Tannoch deals 1 damage to each opponent, and if this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, draw a card. So if we get 2 lands into play on the same turn, Tannoch is going to trigger twice. The first trigger will deal 1 damage to each opponent, the second will deal an additional damage to each opponent and draw us a card. And then every additional trigger we get that same turn, if we somehow get more lands entering during our turn, Tannoch is just going to do that damage. We only draw the card on the second time, not every other time. but it's per turn, so we can draw many cards from Tanic over the course of the game. Notably, I also have the other version of Tanic as a commander deck, so if you want to check out the video's description, you will be able to see a link to that video, and it's pretty fun. I really like this version of him, though, because he does a lot of work for us. Next up, we have Tireless Provisioner. We have two different tireless creatures. The Provisioner is the newer of the two. We're going to talk about them briefly. 2 and a green for a 3/2 Elf Scout with Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we either make a food or a treasure token. Food tokens are artifacts that if we pay 2, tap and sack them, we gain 3 life. Treasures are artifacts that if we just tap and sack them, we get to add 1 mana of any color. So Tireless Provisioner is here not usually to make food for us. Most of the time we want our lands to enter and we want to make a treasure token, which is sort of like saying we get a free additional mana, even though it's just a one-off mana, that we can bank or use right away in the form of that treasure token. So if we have a land enter untapped and we make a treasure token off the Provisioner's landfall trigger, then now we have 2 mana, at least once, from just playing 1 land drop. So that's pretty nice for us. Similarly is the earlier version of this design, which is Tireless Tracker. This is 2 and a green for a 3/2 human scout with landfall. Whenever land we control enters, we investigate, which means we make a clue token. Clue tokens are pay 2 and sack them, we don't even have to tap it, to draw a card. So Tireless Tracker translates our landfall into delayed card advantage, while Tireless Provisioner translates our landfall into life gain or additional mana production. Both are great in our deck, especially because Tireless Tracker also says whenever we sacrifice a clue, like the clues it's making for us, we put a counter on it. So it gets bigger every time we find out more about our mystery, because it's tracking something down. Next up is Mightform Harmonizer, one of our several Edge of Eternity's cards in this deck, all of which are pretty cool. This is 2 and double green for an insect druid with landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we double the power of target creature we control until end of turn. That doesn't change the number of counters on it, but it does take those counters into account when calculating the power, doubles it. Now, it is worth noting, if we double the power of something and then put a counter on it, that counters what the counter adds to power is not itself doubled. We need to make sure that if we have multiple triggers that are all landfall based, one of which is putting a counter on a creature and the other of which is Mightform Harmonizer's doubles trigger, we want to make sure that that counter goes on the creature first and then we double its power. That's just how the calculation works. So yeah. But Mightform Harmonizer also has Warp for 2 and a green, which is an alternate casting cost. That means we can pay, rather than 2 and double green, we can just pay 2 and a green, have the Mightform Harmonizer enter, and then at the end step, we will exile it, and on a later turn, we may cast it from exile for 2 and double green. So we can get it to come in and have a little preview of it. It'll stick around for just 1 turn, and at the end of that turn, it goes away, and we can cast it for its full cost on a later turn. The reason we might want that is because if we warp it in for 2 and a green, we're not having to pay 2 and double green in order to get it in. So we could do this on turn 3, and then or turn 4, let's say, cast it for its warp cost, play our land for turn, double the power of something, and get value out of it that way. It's pretty good. We can target itself, of course, but if we're warping it in, it's not going to be able to attack because it doesn't come with haste. So this is pretty nice for us in a couple of ways. Not only does it make our lands that are earthbent more threatening by doubling their power, it also lets us cast it twice. We can cast it for its normal cost, or we can cast it for its warp cost, and then on a later turn, its normal cost again, which means we've gotten 2 triggers from it thanks to Toph. We have a couple of different warp cards in the deck, or cards that work similarly to this, and it's worth noting that they all give us that extra value. Next is Embodiment of Insight. 4 and a green for a 4/4 elemental with vigilance that says land creatures you control have vigilance. This is awesome for us. It makes it so we can attack with our lands, and assuming they survive, or attack with our earthbent lands, that is, assuming they survive, they will still be untapped, so we can tap them for mana after combat, or even during combat if we have instants to cast. It also has a landfall trigger whenever a land we control enters. We may have target land we control become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until end of turn, and it's still a land. So a couple of things that are important about this. These creatures are not earthbent, which means if we use the Embodiment of Insight's Landfall trigger to make one of our lands into an elemental. It will be a 3/3. We can attack or block with it, and if it dies, it just goes to the graveyard. We've just lost it. There are ways we have to get things back out of our graveyard, but it's not the same as with Earthbending, which inherently sets up a delayed trigger so that when that land creature, dies or goes to exile, it'll come back tapped to the battlefield. So we want to note that these 3/3s are not as good, kind of, in that sense, as Earthbent lands. However, it is also worth noting we can target an Earthbent land with this Landfall ability, or we can target a land that we have turned into an elemental until end of turn with Earthbending. For example, if the simplest way to look at it is this. Let's say Toph is already in play. We cast Embodiment of Insight, Toph will trigger since we cast a spell, and we can Earthbend 1, and let's make one of our forests into a 0/0 with a counter on it, so it's a 1/1 with haste. Then Embodiment of Insight enters, and we make our landfall. We make our land drop for the turn. It triggers Embodiment of Insight, which lets us choose a land to become a 3/3 elemental. We're going to choose that same forest that we targeted with Toph's Earthbend trigger. So now, that forest, instead of being a 0/0, until end of turn, it's a 3/3 elemental that's still a land. It has haste, both from the Embodiment of Insight's ability and from just inherently having it from being Earthbent. So it's going to be a 4/4 haste for us, since it's a 3/3 with a 1/1 counter on it. And if it dies this turn, it has been Earthbent, so it will come back for us. So yeah, we could do it the opposite direction. Maybe we get Landfall, we make our land drop first, Embodiment of Insight triggers, makes one of our mountains into an elemental, then we cast a spell, and Toph lets us put a counter on something, and maybe we want to put it on that mountain that has become a 3/3 elemental, and now it's a 4/4, because it's a 3/3 with a counter on it. And if it survives until end of turn, either direction we do this, it will revert back to being a 0/0 non-elemental creature without that 3/3 base power and toughness. Embodiment of Insight we kind of use, even though this doesn't give it +3/+3, if we target something that's already Earthbent or that we're going to Earthbend right after, it's as though we're giving it a giant growth effect. The other thing that's worth noting is that it makes it an elemental, which is not important to most of our deck, but we do have one or two cards that care about elementals. Notably, the Embodiment of Insight is itself an elemental, but so too will these lands be elementals, at least until end of turn, which is relevant for our Omnath later on, we'll talk about. So yeah, several different things that the Embodiment of Insight gives us here, in addition to just giving all of our land creatures vigilance. Pretty good. Use Social Engineering is another Edge of Eternity's card with Warp. This is an enchantment, however, for 3 and double green with Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we make a 2/2 colorless robot artifact creature token. So bonus tokens every time we get land in play, that's like Scoot Swarm, just not as scary. But it also has Warp for 1 and a green. So we play this on turn 3, warp it in, play our land drop for that turn, we get a 2/2 creature, this goes to exile, and that's essentially like we played a Grey Ogre. We spent 3 mana to get a 2/2, but we actually didn't spend that 3rd mana, so it was a bear, 2 mana 2/2, kind of, and then we can cast this later as well. And if we warp this in on a turn that we already have Toph out, it's also going to give us that extra Earthbend trigger from us casting a spell. Next up, we have Primeval Bounty. Primeval Bounty is really fun and just such a solid commander card. This is 5 and a green for an enchantment that says whenever you play the game, get a thing. Just like Toph. Whenever you cast a creature spell, make a 3/3 green beast creature token. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, any spell that isn't a creature, we put a 3 1/1 counters on a creature we control. It does not have to be Toph or one of our lands. It can be any creature we control, so we can pump something up with a permanent giant growth. And it has Landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we gain 3 life. So just playing the game, we get value. That's what Toph wants us to do, so we're going to do it. Rampaging Baloths is 4 and double green for a 6/6 beast with trample that makes us a 4/4 green beast creature token whenever we have our Landfall trigger. Now those tokens do not have trample themselves, but this is like a better Colossal Dreadmaw, if you want to look at it that way, and it's reprinted in Foundations, so just, yeah, this is a fun one. Glacier Godmaw is another Edge of Eternity's card, but without Warp. 5 and double green gives us a 6/6 Trampling Leviathan. Awesome art. Look at that ship right there. This is huge. That says when it enters, we make a lander token. Lander tokens are Wayfarer's Baubles. They are artifacts that if we pay 2, tap, and sack them, we get to rampant growth. We get to search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So we don't get landfall automatically when the Godmaw enters, but if we have 2 extra mana, either that turn or any other turn, we can trigger landfall at instant speed by sacrificing that lander token and going and finding ourselves a basic land. Great. Also, the Glacier Godmaw has a landfall trigger itself. Whenever a land we control enters, creatures we control get +1/+1 and vigilance and haste until end of turn. Now, our Earthbent lands already have haste, but giving them vigilance is pretty nice, and a little bit of a power and toughness boost. Yeah, can't say no to that. And since this affects everything, not just our land creatures, this is sort of like a baby version of Craterhoof or the Endray's Forerunners, the Angry Bacon. Just any of these effects are nice. Now, it's only +1/+1 and vigilance and haste. It doesn't give trample, but we have a lot of ways in this deck to get multiple lands into play in the same turn, which means multiple triggers from Glacier Godmaw. We might be able to get +3, +4, whatever it may be, to the power and toughness of all of our creatures, in addition to vigilance and haste, and that's a pretty big swing for us. Next up is Omnath. I mentioned a moment ago. 3 double red and double green, so 7 mana. Gives us a 5/5 elemental with landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we make a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token. So it's not Scoot Swarm, but it's kind of like Scoot Swarm's earlier version of itself, where we make extra creatures of the same color and power and toughness and type every time we get landfall in, the way that the Scoots make those 1/1 insects. But Omnath also says whenever Omnath or another elemental we control dies, Omnath deals 3 damage to any target. So that's not just the elementals Omnath is making, it's also that embodiment of insight and any of the lands that have become elementals from its landfall trigger. Even if they're going to come back because they're earth bent, Omnath will still trigger because it'll see an elemental die. And we get a free lightning bolt, which is 3 damage to any target. Pretty good. Finally, in this section, we have a newish card from the recent Lorwyn Eclipsed set, Sapling Nursery. 6 and double green for an enchantment that has affinity for forests, which means it costs 1 generic less to cast for each forest we control. Doesn't even say basic forest. So that means if we have 6 forests in play, Sapling Nursery just costs double green. It can't go below that because that's the only generic mana component to its cost, and that's all that affinity reduces, but still pretty nice. And it has landfall. Whenever a land we control enters, we make a 3/4 green treefolk creature token with reach. So a 3/4 for free every time we get a land into play. It's not Omnath's 5/5 elementals, but it's still pretty solid. In addition, for 1 and a green, we can exile Sapling Nursery to give all of our forests and our treefolk indestructible until end of turn. So maybe our embodiment of insight has made some of our forests into 3/3 elementals until end of turn, and we did not get to earthbend them as well, so they're not protected. Sapling Nursery can protect them if they would have otherwise died. And it protects our treefolk, which is basically just these tokens. But yeah, so this part of the effect of the card is not really what we're looking for, but it's nice to have a little bonus effect if we need to protect our things. But really, we're here to make a whole bunch of treefolk and to hopefully get it into play for cheap. Nice. That is our landfall section. The next part of our game plan is about counters. These are all the cards that we have that can put counters on our creatures or can manipulate those counters for us. So we've seen Claim the Kingdom, gives us a 1/1 counter every time we hit our landfall trigger before we have to sacrifice it to it having 4 planned counters on it. Explorer's Cache is 1 and a green for an artifact that enters with 2 1/1 counters on it. Now it is an artifact, not a creature, so those counters don't give it anything. But whenever a creature we control with a 1/1 counter on it dies, we get to put an extra counter on Explorer's Cache. Again, we're just building up all of these counters so that we can use its tap ability, which is tap to move a 1/1 counter from this artifact onto target creature at sorcery speed. So what's pretty nice is we play this out for 2 mana. It comes with 2 counters. We tap it immediately and put a counter on something. And then every turn, we can just tap it again and put another counter on something as long as it has counters on it. And if any of our Earthbent lands are dying, all of our lands that have been Earthbent have at least 1 counter on them. So we're going to get to keep those counters by putting them on the Explorer's cache and slowly distributing them across our board with this tap ability. Origin of Metal Bending is next. This is Toph at the end of Season 2. It's 1 and a green for an instant. This is one of our lessons that says either destroy target artifact or enchantment, or put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, and it gains indestructible until end of turn. So a nice pump and protection effect, or a naturalize. We just get to remove something. Either way, we're all set. It's just a solid naturalize variant to protect our stuff and give a little bit of pump. We've seen Earthbender Ascension. It gives us the ability to put 1/1 counters on our creatures and give them trample until end of turn once Landfall is putting its 4th or later quest counter on it. Evolution Sage lets us put more counters on our creatures by proliferating. The Tale of Toph and Katara and Toph, rather, is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped for the first time during each of your turns, put a counter on it. So, nice. We just get to put counters on all of our creatures, especially our Earthbent lands, when we tap them. So they don't have to attack in order to get that counter, although they can. Whenever we tap one of our non-vigilant creatures, we're going to get a counter on it for the first time each turn. But if we have Earthbent lands that we are tapping for mana, they're also going to get counters every time we tap them for mana because they are becoming tapped. So yeah, Tale of Katara and Toph is a little bit of an interesting sort of budget effect for us that can give us a lot of value over the course of just a few turns. Forgotten Ancient is next. I love Mr. Baby Cakes, which was this card's playtest name. This is 3 and a green for a 0/3 elemental. It's another elemental that says whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. I want you to read that again because it's whenever a player casts a spell. So it's any spell being cast by any player. Everyone at the table, anytime they cast a spell, Forgotten Ancient gets a counter. It says may, but we're going to. We're going to fill Mr. Baby Cakes up with 1/1 counters, because at the beginning of our upkeep, we can move any number of 1/1 counters from Mr. Baby Cakes onto other creatures. It doesn't even say other creatures you control. So we can use this politically. We can say, look, you can attack me if you choose to, but if you choose to attack someone else, you can see I've got 3 counters on Forgotten Ancient. I will put all 3 of them on your creatures or on your commander next turn, something along those lines. Or maybe we make it proactively, like, hey, you know, you've got some spells you could be casting. I'll tell you what, if you cast spells and you and I are friends, you're not aggressive to me, every counter that I put on Forgotten Ancient from your spells, I'll put on your creatures. We can make any number of deals with this. Or we put them on our own creatures, on Toph, on our Earthbent lands, spread them around. We know that any of our counters that go on our lands are going to be gone from us if those lands die, but that's true of any creature. As long as, of course, we don't already have Explorer's Cache into play. So yeah, now I do want to mention Explorer's Cache only gets a single 1/1 counter on it, no matter how many counters were on the creature that dies, but still, it's something. Leyline of Abundance is next, and you don't have to, of course, run the Enchanting Tales printings, but I really like using them. This is 2 and double green for an enchantment, but it's a leyline, so it has the leyline text. If this card is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. That is a turn 0 effect. You don't have to wait till your first turn if you're not first player for this to be the case. If it's in your opening hand, you say, all right, everyone ready? And you say, I have a before turn 1 action, and you just put this into play for free. Pretty neat. And it does 2 things. It says whenever we tap a creature for mana, we add an additional green. So we don't have any, I don't think, mana dorks in this deck, but anytime you Earthbent a land, that land is a creature. So if we tap it for mana, it's going to make us an additional green, which is like putting Wild Growth on all of our Earthbent lands. It adds to the value that Toph gives us when we cast our spells by making our Earthbent lands tap for 2 mana. And we can pay 6 and double green, which is a lot, but if all of our lands are with counters on them or tapping for, extra mana, it's not as hard for us to get to. We can do that to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. So pretty good. Next up, we have seen Primeval Bounty. Primeval Bounty gets us counters, 3 counters, on any creature we control whenever we cast a non-creature spell. And we have Slurk, all ingesting. 5 and a green for a 0/0 legendary ooze that enters with 5 1/1 counters on it. So it's 6 mana for a 5/5 essentially. And when it or another creature we control dies, if that creature had a 1/1 counter on it, we put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control that has a 1/1 counter on it. So it's not just each creature we control, those creatures already have to have counters on them, but it's sort of like saying every time any of your creatures with counters on them die, proliferate the 1/1 counters only on all of your other creatures. That's pretty good. Adds to all of our creatures that are going to have counters on them. It gives us an additional bit of value anytime one of our Earthbent lands dies, and it works when Slurk dies itself, so that's pretty cool. It also has Partner, which is not relevant for this deck, but it's a nice little effect to have. And that covers our counters section and most of the big parts of our game plan. We're going to move on to our support sections, but first, do you maybe feel like liking the video? You might even subscribe to the channel. I don't know. You don't have to do either of these things, but I just wanted to remind you, it's an option for you. I mean, you don't have to, obviously. I appreciate you being here either way. Thanks for joining me. So, like I said, we're going to check out these support sections of our deck right now, starting with our card advantage section. As usual, I have tagged these as draw. It doesn't mean they all do the draw a card action. They just give us access to more cards. For example, Bushwhack. This is a single green for a sorcery that lets us either search our library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle, so Lay of the Land, or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So either you find a bush or you whack something. This is a solid card that gives us good value and costs very little, so it's easy to trigger Toph with it. And it doesn't draw us a card, but it does Lay of the Land for us, which is like, quote-unquote, drawing a basic land, so that's pretty good for us. And if we don't need that, we use it as a removal effect. Maybe a way, even, to have one of our Earthbent lands fight a creature we don't control, and have them both die, which triggers the land, the Earthbending delayed trigger, to bring that land back and gives us Landfall as well. Nice. Seismic Sense is next, another Toph-themed lesson. This is a single green for a lesson, a sorcery, that says we look at the top X cards of our library, where X is the number of lands we control, so this gets better as the game goes on. We can reveal a creature or land card from among them, put it in our hand, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So a nice way to draw a card. It's probably not going to miss, unless we're casting it early in the game, and we just happen not to hit any lands or creatures in the top X of our library. But we do have 21 creatures in the deck, which is 20 cards in the deck, since Toph, of course, is counted in that 21. And a solid, I think, 40 lands in the deck, because it says 43 here since we have several modal double-faced lands. But yeah, Seismic Sense gives us a very good chance of getting a hit, and if we get a land with it, it doesn't even have to be a basic land. If we get a creature, then we got a creature. Nice. Next up, one of our other expensive cards in the deck, but still not too expensive for what it does. This is Skull Clamp, a classic. A single generic mana gives us an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature +1/-1. Now I know you're thinking, but what if we put this on one of our Earthbent lands that's just a 1/1? Wouldn't it die? Yes, and that's the reason you use Skull Clamp. If you've never seen Skull Clamp before, this card is completely busted as a value engine because it says, whenever a equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. So the idea here is we cast Skull Clamp for 1. That will trigger Toph, and we Earthbend one of our lands that wasn't already Earthbent. Now it's a 1/1. We then tap that land for mana to equip Skull Clamp to it. It becomes a 2/0 and dies. Earthbend will bring it right back for us, put it back into play, tapped. It was already tapped since we tapped it for mana, and it triggers any Earthbend or any landfall or any death triggers we may have, including Skull Clamp's own death trigger, which is draw 2 cards. So essentially, we paid 2 mana to draw 2 cards. That's crazy. And then after that, every turn we want to, or on that same turn, maybe we have another land that's just a 1/1. We can pay a mana and equip Skull Clamp to it as well. It will come back thanks to being Earthbent, and we will draw 2 more cards. So this is a great way to repeatedly draw cards over and over and over. Interestingly, it also works with some of our Hardened Scales effects. So if we have a land that we put 1 counter on it, but that actually puts multiple counters so that, Skull Clamping that land doesn't kill it, well then that would be a 2/2 land, let's say. We put Skull Clamp on it, and now it's a 3/1. So we just attack with our 3/1, which is a blade. Blades are great for attacking and defending. They're great to deter people from attacking us because they will trade with anything, in a sense. Like, nothing that does damage to them is going to avoid killing it, which is just going to draw us 2 cards. But if we're attacking with it, they've either going to block it, which is going to draw 2 cards for us, or take 3 damage, which is a lightning bolt, which is not nothing. So yeah, Skull Clamp can be very powerful for us in a number of different ways, and it's totally worth the money in this deck. Next up, we have Stocking the Pantry. This is a really fun one. A single green for an enchantment that says whenever you put 1 or more 1/1 counters on a creature you control. Notably, that's every time we Earthbend. Because remember, Earthbending gives us the ability to take a land, make it into a creature, and put a counter on it. So it becomes a creature before the counter goes on it. So Stocking the Pantry will see us putting a counter on a creature we control, as opposed to putting counters on it and it becomes a land after that. And then, if we do that, we put a supply counter on this enchantment. This is, again, another sort of vanity counter. It doesn't actually have an inherent mechanical meaning. It's just used by the enchantment. And then we can pay 2 and remove a supply counter from this enchantment to draw a card. So essentially, every time we put any number of counters on a creature, so if we were putting counters on multiple creatures, it's going to trigger once for each of those creatures. If we're putting it doesn't matter how many counters go on those creatures, it just does trigger for each creature. We're essentially getting the ability to remove a counter and pay 2 to draw a card, so it's sort of like it's a stockpile of clues, where we're paying 2 and just drawing a card. We're not sacking artifacts or getting artifacts to enter, so it's not quite the same, but it works out similarly for us with Stocking the Pantry. So a great way to give us more value every time Toph Earthbends something, and to save up the ability for us to draw more cards as we need them. Pretty good. Next up, we have Cleansing Wildfire. This is one of several cards in the deck that does something kind of similar, but this is sort of the one that does it. I guess this one does it differently from the others. You'll see. So this is 1 and a red for a sorcery that says destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle, and then we draw a card. We are here to destroy our own lands with Cleansing Wildfire. We do not want to use this to blow up our opponent's lands, although we can. It's not a terrible thing to do, but as I will mention later on in the video, the kind of decks that I build are of a power level that the pods that want them are usually not looking for an experience where people are blowing up each other's lands. They don't want any kind of mana denial, especially mass land destruction. So Cleansing Wildfire, while it can hit a problematic non-basic, which is totally fine to do, if we're not hitting a problematic non-basic, like a Rogue's Passage that's empowering a Voltron commander to do a lot of unblockable damage to us, or a player playing Glacial Chasm, stopping themselves from taking any damage from combat, which is disempowering our own game plan, anything that would be in the land base that's empowering someone's game plan or making ours less effectual is problematic and is therefore a threat and is therefore something that we need to deal with. But if it's not that, if it's just someone, fixing their mana or, playing a bounce land and getting, 2 mana per tap from that land, we don't need to use Cleansing Wildfire on that. We get much more value using it on our own Earthbent lands. Because for 2 mana, what this says is, let your Earthbent land die and come back to the battlefield tapped, which will trigger death triggers, it triggers landfall triggers, and we can even use the mana from that land to pay for Cleansing Wildfire. So we're not even really down 2 mana doing this. And it will come back getting all those triggers, and we cycle. We draw a card to replace Cleansing Wildfire. So this can do a lot for us. It's not really a land destruction spell. It's a get your value from an Earthbent spell, from an Earthbent land spell, and draw a card. Also notable, it does not say, as an additional cost, choose a target land, which means we don't have to decide which land we're destroying until this begins resolving. So we cast Cleansing Wildfire, it's on the stack, and we only then have to destroy a target land, which means when we cast Cleansing Wildfire, we can have it, if we have Toph in play, it will trigger Toph. So at that point, we have we have the Toph's cast a spell trigger. We will earthbend a land, and that can be the very land we choose to destroy. And so it will come right back for us, especially since that could be a land, like I mentioned a moment ago, that we tapped for mana in order to even cast Cleansing Wildfire. So we're not really losing anything from this. We're getting all of our triggers from an earthbent land, getting counters on it, dying, returning to the battlefield, all that. Plus, we're drawing a card to replace Cleansing Wildfire. Pretty nice. Next up, we have Explore. Obviously, we're using the Avatar art for it, but it's just the classic 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us play an additional land this turn and draws us a card. So it's not Growth Spiral. In a lot of ways, it's better. An extra land is pretty good for us in a deck that has so much card advantage and so many ways to get value from lands coming into play. So this lets us get a second land drop and draw a card, which might be that land that we want to even play. Pretty good. Hunter's Talent is next. I love Hunter's Talent. This has given me, over the amount of time that I've been putting this in decks, it just gives so much value for so little mana. This is a class enchantment from Bloombro. The way this works is when it comes in for 1 and a green, it has this first ability and is level 1. At sorcery speed, we can pay 1 and a green to level it up to level 2, and now it has the text from both sections. Once it's level 2, again at sorcery speed, we can pay 3 and a green to level it up to level 3, and now it has all this text. You see how it works. So the first chapter, or the first level, is really a removal spell. When it enters, target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to target creature we don't control. So it's Rabid Bite at sorcery speed. That's fine. Then for 1 and a green, at level 2, whenever we attack, one of our attacking creatures gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. A little bit of evasion, a little tiny bit of pump, it's something to put on our attacking earthbent lands. And at level 3, at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature power 4 or greater, draw a card. So it seems like we have a lot of small powered creatures in this deck, but we actually have plenty of ways. We have plenty of creatures that are actually big. Embodiment of Insight, Omnath, our Glacier Godmaw. We have several of those, but a number of those, like Omnath, also make tokens that are power 4 or greater. Like Omnath makes those 5/5 elementals. Our Rampaging Baloths makes 4/4 beast creature tokens, and so forth. Plus, we can build up one of our lands, and it's not hard to do so, to have power 4 or greater from Earthbending. So it's also possible to be able to get this in-step draw from our lands. So yeah, Hunter's Talent gives us lots of value throughout its levels. Next up is Kenrith's Transformation, a great removal spell from Throne of Eldraine, my favorite set. This is 1 and a green for an aura that enchants a creature, and when it enters, we draw a card, so it replaces itself. And it makes that enchanted creature lose all abilities and become a green elk creature token, or a creature rather, with base power and toughness 3/3. So this is a humble effect. It takes away all that creature's abilities and just makes it a 3/3 elk, nothing else. We use this on our opponent's creatures. We want to make their commander, or their big, scary Galta, or their value engine like Tatiova, into a vanilla 3/3 elk. That seems pretty good. They can easily get rid of that, either by interacting with Kenrith's Transformation directly, or by attacking or blocking with that now elk creature and having it die. And so if it was their commander, they can just put it back in the command zone when it dies and recast it, but that is slowing them down. And in the process, we have shut down whatever value they were getting from that creature, and we got to draw a card. Nice. Next up is True Ancestry. This is 1 and a green for another lesson. It's a sorcery that says return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand and make a clue token. So that clue is the reason it's in this section, because we can use that to draw a card, but it also gives us a little bit of recursion. We have a lot of permanents in this deck, and so if we happen to lose one, even if it's our commander herself, if we know we've got True Ancestry in hand, we can just regrow her back into our hand and we don't have to worry about the commander tax. Or this can hit, it doesn't say non-land permanent, so if we have a land in our graveyard and we really need to make another land drop, True Ancestry can get it back for us. Nice. Cultivate is next. I know you're thinking, but isn't Cultivate a ramp spell? It's both. This is 2 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal them, put one on the battlefield tapped and the other in our hand, and then we shuffle. So Cultivate is drawing us a card by putting a card in our hand. It's also ramping us by putting a land into the play. So it's rampant growth and Lay of the Land combined, but rather than being 1 and double green, it's 2 and a green. So same amount of mana, a little bit easier to cast, and very nice for us. Really helps with a lot of our synergies here, and of course does put that land in our hand. So if we need to have a certain number of lands in hand because maybe an opponent is playing hand attack spells or is forcing us to discard, whatever it may be, then Cultivate can help us with that as well. Yeah, and it gives us a land that we can play as our land drop next turn if we need to make land drops on consecutive turns. Pretty good. Garruk's Uprising is next. 2 and a green for an enchantment that does 3 things. The first thing is it gives all of our creatures trample. All the time, they always have trample. Sounds great. It says when it enters, if we control a creature power 4 or greater, we draw a card. So we get that value and get Garruk's Uprising to replace itself when it first comes in. But what if we have those creatures enter after it's in play? Well, whenever a creature we control with power 4 or greater enters, we also draw a card. So Garruk's Uprising gives us repeatable card draw, especially if we have something like Omnath or Rampaging Baloths in play, so that every time we get our Landfall, we're getting a token with power 4 or greater, which means we're also drawing a card. And all of those tokens have trample because all of our creatures do. Nice. Meltstrider Eulogist is another Edge of Eternity's card. This is 2 and a green for a 3/3 insect soldier that says whenever a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it dies, draw a card. So we're going to have this happen pretty often with our aggressive attacking lands that have been Earthbent. Seems good. Rites of Flourishing is next. This is so we can help everyone out, because Toph is a little standoffish and a little selfish, to be honest, when she's first joining the gang, but she learns to be part of the team. So Rites of Flourishing is our little bit of let's help the whole team. For 2 and a green, we have an enchantment with 2 effects. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card, and each player may play an additional non-land or additional land on each of their turns. So everyone gets an extra land drop and an extra card during their draw step. It helps everyone, but it's going to help us more because we're playing a Landfall deck and a deck that cares about casting a lot of spells. So Rites of Flourishing is great for us all, and yeah, we get to enjoy these little frogs. Next up, we have Spinner of Souls, another great Death Triggers card from Foundations. 2 and a green for a 4/3 Spider Spirit, notably power 4 or greater, that has reach. And it says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card in your hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order. So every time we have any creature die, which includes our Earthbent lands, they are not tokens, they are cards. So whenever they die, we can essentially cascade into a creature card and it goes in our hand, so that we get to draw a creature every time any of our creatures that aren't tokens dies. Great, love Spinner of Souls. Next up, we've seen Tanuk can draw us a card if we make a second land, if we have a second landfall trigger on each of our turns, in addition to that 1 damage ping to each opponent for all of our land drops, or landfall triggers. Tyler's Tracker makes us clue tokens whenever we have landfall, so that draws us cards. And last in the section, we have Disciple of Freyalise. This card is so cool in this deck, also beautiful. 3 and triple green for a 3/3 Elf Druid, so 6 mana for a 3/3 is not very great. But when it enters, we may sacrifice another creature, and if we do, we gain life and draw cards, both equal to the creature's power. So if we sacrifice a 3/3, we can't sacrifice the Disciple because it says another, but if we sacrifice a 3/3, we'll gain 3 life, draw 3 cards, and that's pretty solid to go with our 3/3. This is also, however, an MDFC, a modal double-faced card. It has Garden of Freyalise on the back, so we can play this either by casting it as Disciple of Freyalise, or we can just play the backside as our land drop. This is a land that enters tapped unless we pay 3 life as it's coming in. So we can pay 3 and it comes in untapped as a green source, taps for green, or if we don't, it just comes in as a tap land. That's fine. What's especially nice about this is that Garden of Freyalise is on the back side of the card. And when a card enters a zone without being cast or without us sort of choosing which side is entering, it always enters from the front side. We only consider the front side when it's anywhere other than the stack or the battlefield too, just notably. So that means if we play Garden of Freyalise as a land drop, which is kind of what we want to do in this deck, and then we Earthbend this garden, and then that Earthbent land dies, it will return from the graveyard thanks to the delayed trigger from Earthbending as Disciple of Freyalise. So we are never paying this 6 mana. We are playing Garden of Freyalise and paying the 3 life if we need the mana, not paying it if we don't, and then casting any spell to make this into an Earthbent land. And then, at any time this happens to die, it will come back as Disciple of Freyalise and get its Interest trigger, which lets us sacrifice another Earthbent land, or any creature we want, really. But if it's one of, the Rampaging Baloth's Beast tokens, then we'll gain 4 and draw 4 cards. Great. If it's another Earthbent land, we'll gain an amount of life equal to its power based on however many counters it has on it, and draw that many cards, and then that land will come back as well, thanks to Earthbending, and we'll get even more of our triggers, death triggers, landfall triggers, and so forth. So Disciple of Freyalise is really cool in that we can cheat it in this way. So yeah, pretty nice. That is our card advantage section. Let's go now to our acceleration. Oh, a little premature. There we go. As usual, I've tagged these as ramp. So Soul Ring, of course, is a single generic mana for an artifact that if we tap it, it adds 2 colorless. It's very powerful. We have a number of powerful and expensive spells in our deck, but even if not, if you look at the data, there's almost no decks that don't simply benefit from having Soul Ring in the list, so it's ubiquitous for a reason, and it's the symbol of the format, so put it in your deck. Arcane Signet, also an auto-include, essentially. For 2 generic, we get an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so in this deck, red or green. It's a 2 mana untapped rock that makes both of our colors. Yeah, we're gonna run it. It's better than any kind of 2 mana acceleration we could use in another way. Cleansing Wildfire, we've seen it can be a ramp effect because it lets us find a land after destroying a land that may have been Earthbent. So we don't actually lose the land we destroyed, we just find an extra land. Pretty good. Colony Heart Expedition, whenever we get enough quest counters on it, if we remove 3 of them and sacrifice it, we get to Explosive Vegetation and find 2 basics and put them into play tapped. Seems good. Shared Roots is Rampant Growth, just as a lesson. For 1 and a green, we get a sorcery lesson that lets us search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. It's exactly Rampant Growth. It just has the lesson subtype, so it helps with Toph with her second trigger. When we earthbend something and the spell we cast was a lesson, we get to put an extra 1/1 counter on whatever we're earthbending. Whatever land we're earthbending, that is. We've seen Cultivate. It puts a land into play and gives us a land in hand. Cycle of Renewal is next. And I'm just going to scroll down a little bit because we have several cards that work like Cycle of Renewal. This is another lesson. At instant speed, for 2 and a green, we can sacrifice a land, search our library for up to 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Very, very simple. But again, much like Cleansing Wildfire, it does not require us to sacrifice the land as an additional cost. The spell Harrow does. So I've specifically not put Harrow in this deck, even though it's a solid card, because we want to be able to cast Cycle of Renewal, get the casting trigger from Toph to earthbend one of our lands, and then make that the land we sacrifice, because that's just more value for us from this play pattern. Harrow would be fine in this deck as well, but it would require us to already have a land be earthbent if we don't want to just lose that land. So might as well use the ones that don't require us to sack a land as part of the cost, but rather as part of resolution. So Cycle of Renewal lets us sacrifice a land, probably the one that we just earthbent with Toph. That one will come back, we'll get any death triggers and any landfall triggers as usual, and then we'll get to go Explosive Vegetation. Find 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Great. We've seen Earthbender Ascension. It lets us Rampant Growth as part of its Interest trigger. Great. Intis Restoration is similar to Cycle of Renewal. It's not a lesson, but at instant speed, for 2 and a green, we can sack a land, search for 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So, same thing we just saw. However, if we control a creature power 4 or greater, instead, we search for 3 lands. Basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is an upgrade to our effect that we got from Cycle of Renewal. Now, it's not a lesson, so it's not a strict upgrade, but Intis Restoration gives us some solid value, especially since in our mostly green deck, it's not unlikely for us to have creatures power 4 or greater, as we've already discussed. So pretty good. Primal Growth is next. This is a sorcery for 2 and a green that has a kicker cost of sacrificing a creature. So this sort of is Harrow. It's we have to sack a creature in order to get this kicked, and when we pay the 2 and a green, we search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. Notably, it does not say put it on the battlefield tapped, the way that our Cycle of Renewal and Interest Restoration do. So we can, for 3 mana, find an untapped basic land. And if we kicked this, instead we search for 2 basics, put them on the battlefield, and shuffle. So 2 untapped basics. But it does require us to kick it by sacrificing a creature, which is to say an additional cost, the way that Harrow works and the way that Cycle of Renewal and Interest Restoration do not. So not ideal for us here, but also not terrible, because it's likely that we have at least 1 land that's Earthbent already kicking around. Get it? Yeah. Anyway, and since that land has been Earthbent, it is a creature, so we can sacrifice it. But we can also sacrifice one of our non-lands, maybe one of the tokens that we made with Scoot Swarm that's just a 1/1 insect. That's totally fine as well. Either way, Primal Growth gives us a nice way to find a land, or hopefully 2 lands, and have them come in untapped so that we can then use that mana right away. Next up is Roiling Regrowth. This is the version of Harrow that came from Zendikar Rising. It is the same as Cycle of Renewal, just not a lesson. 2 and a green, instant speed, sack a land, search for 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So great, another version of this that doesn't require us to sacrifice the land as part of the casting cost. Worth noting. Next is Spelunking. Spelunking is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says when it enters, we draw a card and we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. That is Growth Spiral. It doesn't give us an extra land drop, it means as part of this effect, if we have a land in hand after we've drawn a card, we may then put it onto play. It does not count as our land drop, but we have to do it right then if we are going to do it. And if we put a cave onto the battlefield this way, we gain 4 life. We do have a single cave in this deck, so we don't have to, have that in hand. It's not likely that it happens, but if we happen to be able to put it into play this way, gaining 4 life is a nice little bonus. So Spelunking is really just Growth Spiral for 3 mana, which is not a solid rate, but it does say lands we control enter untapped, which is incredible, because this is a replacement effect, just like Cycle of Renewal or we'll use Shared Roots. It puts the land that we find on the battlefield tapped. That's a replacement effect. Kind of. Not really, I guess. It puts it on the battlefield tapped. But lands we control enter untapped. So we can choose to have Spelunking apply, and of course we will. I guess we don't really get to choose in this case. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about what I'm saying about replacement effects. I'm being confusing. The point is, Spelunking says anytime we would have a land come into play, if it says it comes in tapped, no it doesn't. Spelunking says it comes in untapped. Shared Roots is 2 mana to find us an untapped land when Spelunking is in play. Cycle of Renewal has us sacrifice a land. If it was Earthbent, it will come back into play untapped, as will all of our Earthbent lands with Spelunking in play, and then we find 2 basics and put them onto the battlefield untapped. Spelunking absolutely accelerates our mana production in a crazy way, especially with the kind of ramp we're doing, but also with the way that Earthbending works when our Earthbent lands die and come back as just lands. If they come back tapped, that's how Earthbending normally works. With Spelunking, they come back untapped, so it's even better. And we've seen these last 3 cards. Tireless Provisioner with Landfall can make us treasures. That gives us some acceleration. Leyland of Abundance lets us tap our creatures for mana and make an additional green when we do. So that's going to help with all of our lands that are Earthbent. And Glacier Godmaw makes us a lander token when it comes in, which is just rampant growth on layaway. Nice. So that is our acceleration section. We do have 1 card that gives us discounts because we have plenty of cards to qualify for it. This is Goblin Anarchomancer, a red and a green for a 2/2 Goblin Shaman that makes each spell we cast that's red or green cost a single generic less to cast. Now, I don't like to run discount effects in my decks most of the time. Even though they are very strong, most of the time they're just not as good as having a card with the same mana value that simply taps for a mana. However, if you do the math, if you have a deck that has at least 40 cards that can benefit from that discount, then it ends up working out fine. That seems like a lot, and it is. However, we have an awful lot of cards in this deck. Most of them are red or green, some of them are colorless, and most of those red and green cards have a generic mana component. So Goblin Anarchomancer would not discount itself if we had one already in play, let's say, because it doesn't have a generic mana component in its cost. As you've seen, we have a couple of spells that just cost a single green, or you'll see at least one that has a single red. But all of the other ones, we have quite a few of those, and it's north of 40 spells, so Goblin and Archmancer is worth putting in the deck and helping us out that way. If you were to want to replace this with just another spell, like just straight up Rampant Growth, or Farseek, or something like that, that would also be totally fine. And in many games, that might play better. I think the Anarchomancer works great in this deck, and whenever you get it out, it really does change how fast the deck can go, since you're discounting each spell in the same turn even that has that generic mana cost that happens to be red or green. So this can do more work for us than something like Farseek. And yeah, it's one of the... I always like to put at least a few cards in each of my decks that changes the texture of the way the deck plays if it comes out, and the Anarchomancer, even though it has a very simple effect, is certainly one of them. So that is the only card in our discount section. We're going to go now to our interaction section, which again I've just tagged as removal. So Bushwhack, as we've seen, can have one of our creatures fight a creature we don't control. Lightning Bolt is from Alpha, and it's still worth playing. A single red for an instant, does 3 damage to any target. This can burn an opponent's face. This can kill a creature, maybe a creature that's already been damaged, and already so that it has damage marked on it, and we need to kill it off, or just kill something that could have been a blocker. This can hit Planeswalkers. This can hit a battle if someone else is running a battle and we want to make a deal with them and help them out with it. Yeah. Anyway, very powerful card. Still works great, even in Commander. I would put it in any red deck you're running. Collective Resistance is next. This is 1 and a green for an instant with Escalate for a single green, meaning we can choose one of these modes for its effect, or we can choose multiple modes, and for each mode beyond the first, we add an extra green to the cost. So if we want all 3, it costs 1 and triple green, since we would have escalated twice. So what does it give us? We can either destroy an artifact, destroy an enchantment, or give one of our creatures, or any creature, doesn't say target creature you control, hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So Collective Resistance is a pretty nice way to protect ourselves, or destroy an artifact, or destroy an enchantment, or some combination of those. I mean, it's Naturalize, if we look at it as 1 and a green to blow up an artifact or enchantment. Giving ourselves a little bit of extra value is pretty nice. That's sort of Origin of Metal Bending, not quite, but close. But being able to get an artifact and an enchantment, or give one of our creatures hexproof and indestructible and blow up an enchantment if we escalate once, or just do all 3, very, very powerful and flexible for us. We've seen Hunter's Talent. Its first level is Rabid Bite at sorcery speed, so that's pretty good. Kinrith's Transformation shuts down a creature, at least until that creature dies, which is pretty good, and draws us a card. Origin of Metal Bending can destroy an artifact or enchantment. Rocky Rebuke is just Rabid Bite. It's instant speed, 1 and a green. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. Are there better effects that we could use in this deck that give us a pretty similar like removal value for ourselves? Yes, probably. But Rocky Rebuke has Toph on it, so we've got to do a little bit of flavor choices in our deck. And Rocky Rebuke, remember, if we have plenty of creatures in our deck, and many of them are big, Rabid Bite is still a solid card that you can play in Commander, especially if we're doing something like this. Let's say we have an Earthbent land that has become a 3/3 because we've Earthbent it a couple of times, or we have some other effects that are adding more counters to it, whatever it may be. We attack with it, somebody chooses to block it with their 5/5, we cast Rocky Rebuke at instant speed before damage is dealt to have our land do damage equal to its power to the blocking creature. Now that blocking creature already has 3 damage marked on it, and it's about to take 3 more during the combat damage step. So it's been able to trade. And it did cost us our Rocky Rebuke to do so, but the reason we did that wasn't just to kill their creature, it was to make sure our creature died, our land, so that we can get whatever death triggers or landfall triggers that we may have. Pretty good. Next up is Stump Stomp. This is another modal double-faced card. We can play it as a land, which is Burn Willow Clearing. It will enter tapped, unless of course we have Splunking in play, and it taps for both of our colors. Great. Or on the front side, it's a removal spell. 1 and a hybrid Gruul mana, so we can cast this for 1 in a red or 1 in a green, and target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker we don't control. So a little bit better than those sorcery speed rapid bites we were talking about. We can use red with it, and it can hit planeswalkers. Nice. Notably, however, we do not want to use this in the same way that we use that Disciple of Freyalise, because if we play this as Burn Willow Clearing, and then we Earthbend Burn Willow Clearing, and that land dies, it will not come back into play. I know that Earthbend says if an Earthbent land will be destroyed or will go to exile, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Remember, modal double-faced cards always come back with their front face up, and a sorcery is not a spell that can enter the battlefield. Sorceries can only be in your hand, in your library, in your graveyard, on the stack, or I guess in exile. They can't go onto the battlefield. The rules say if an effect would put an instant or sorcery onto the battlefield, it doesn't. It stays in whatever zone it's in. Which means if we Earthbend Burn Willow Clearing, and then that land dies, Earthbend will try to return it to the battlefield, and it will not. It will simply be Stump Stomp in our graveyard. Or if it was exiled, it'll still be Stump Stomp, but it'll be in exile. So yeah, stuck in our graveyard, which is maybe not the worst thing in the world, because we could always just have Toph enter after that, discard a card, and return an instant or sorcery to our hand, which we could return Stump Stomp. And then it's in our hand, we can play it out as Burn Willow Clearing. We've got options here. It just will not let us cast this for free simply because of Earthbending, the way it seems like we're doing with Disciple of Freyalise, because we're not actually casting Disciple of Freyalise when it returns from Earthbending. Yeah, you get it. The same is true of Bridgeworks Battle. This is 2 and a green for a sorcery that gives one of our creatures +2/+2 until end of turn, and has it fight one target creature we don't control. So that fight, as opposed to a bite effect like Rabid Bite, is pretty good. It can maybe kill one of our creatures too, which is something we might want to happen. And if not, no big deal. We've been able to do some damage to an opponent's creature, hopefully kill it, and if our creature has survived, it still has that +2/+2 when we attack with it in combat this turn. And Bridgeworks Battle is an MDFC, with the same text as our Disciple of Freyalise on the back. Tanglespan Bridgeworks is a land that as it enters, we can pay 3, and if we don't, it comes untapped, and it taps for green. So again, if we play it as the Bridgeworks, and we Earthbend it, and it dies or goes to exile, it's going to stay in whatever zone it was in rather than coming back, but nice to be able to have the option. And finally, we've got Omnath. Omnath, when it or another elemental we control dies, deals 3 damage to any target, which is just Lightning Bolt. Pretty good. That is our interaction section. We are running a single board wipe, which is Zuri's Predation. This is 5 and triple green, so very expensive for a board wipe, but it does a lot for us. It's a sorcery that says, for each creature your opponents control, make a 4/4 green Phyrexian Beast creature token. Each of those tokens fights a different one of those creatures. So the idea here is you say, opponent A, you've got 4 creatures in play? Okay, I'm going to make 4 4/4s. Each of my 4/4s is going to attack, or is going to fight one of your creatures. Maybe that kills all of my 4/4s because all of your creatures were big. Maybe that kills all of your creatures because all of my 4/4s are bigger than yours. Whichever of my 4/4s survives the fight, I get to keep. Whichever of your creatures survives the fight, you get to keep. Pretty nice. Opponent B, that's going to happen for you too, and also opponent C. So the idea behind Azuri's Predation is we have a lot of 4/4s entering the battlefield, assuming a big board of creatures on each of our opponent's playmats, and then each of our opponent's creatures is taking 4 damage. And if they have power 4 or greater, or if they have Death Touch, they will also kill one of the tokens that we had. But this does mean, with Garruk's Uprising in play, we're going to draw a lot of cards since we're getting a lot of creatures that are power 4 or greater coming in. And then we get to keep any of those tokens that we made. So this is just a lot of fun and really changes like the setup at the table, because it often ends up with us killing most of the creatures on our opponent's playmats and getting to have a bunch of 4/4s that stick around for us. They don't have haste, but we can certainly use them on our next turn's combat. And so a big change at the table is what 8 mana sorceries are supposed to do, so yeah, pretty fun. And that covers all of our support sections. We're going to go into the supplemental sections now. We have a number of them, but we've seen a lot of the cards in them. We're going to start with our Death Triggers section. Skullclamp has a trigger that when the equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. Of course we want that. Explorer's Cache, when we have any creature that we control with a 1/1 counter on it dying, we get to put a 1/1 counter on Explorer's Cache, which we could then move to another creature at sorcery speed. Meltstrider Eulogist also cares about our creatures with counters on them dying, and draws us a card. Spinner of Souls just cares that our creatures, when they die, aren't tokens. Because if they're not tokens, when they die, we get to reveal cards until we get to a creature and put it in our hand. Titania, we have not yet seen. Titania is Titania Protector of Argoth. She's 3 and double green for a 5/3 legendary elemental. She's another elemental. It says when she enters, we return target land card from our graveyard to the battlefield. So if we somehow got lands into our graveyard and they didn't come back from being Earthbent, Titania can grab one back for us and puts it directly into play. Doesn't even say onto the battlefield tapped. And whenever a land we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we make a 5/3 green elemental creature token. So this is really sweet. It's another one of these. We have a 5/3 green creature. We're going to make a 5/3 green elemental. Titania is an elemental. So we're sort of making another Titania, just without her abilities. Every time we have a land go from the battlefield to the graveyard, which is what Earthbent lands are doing every time they die. They, as a creature, die, go to the graveyard, and then Earthbend brings them back. But they did go to the graveyard, so in the process, Titania is going to give us a 5/3 elemental and just build up our board even bigger. Great. Eudora Gravegardener is next. This card is so cool in this deck. This is 4 and a green for a 5/5 legendary Treefolk Druid. Check this out. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's a forest land. It has no other types or abilities. So the way this works in our deck, check this out. Imagine if you have a mountain and you Earthbend it, and then it dies while Eudora is in play. We can have it come back into play tapped under our control, because that's what Earthbend lets us do. But this is another death trigger, just like our Earthbending is a death trigger. So we can have this take precedence first, and then, or have this trigger resolve first, and then the Earthbent land will not come back into play tapped. Instead, it will come back untapped, face down, as a forest. I know that sounds crazy. Why would you do that? Well, maybe we need more green mana, so we're Earthbending our red lands in order to have them die and come back, thanks to Eudora, as forests. That's a weird thing to do, but we sure could. But what if we have a creature die? What if we have our Meltstrider Eulogist die? Well, it was a non-token creature, so we can use Eudora to return to the battlefield face down, untapped, as a forest. We suddenly have mana we can use to use this turn. But what if we want to then Earthbend that land? It is a face down creature, but it is a forest as well. So now it's a forest that has a counter on it and is a 0/0 creature with haste, that if it dies, we can have it come back tapped, which means it will come back tapped either as a forest that's still face down because it's a non-token creature, meaning our forest creatures, our land creatures, can't not come back as lands. Or we have it come back, we just use the Earthbend death trigger to bring it back tapped under our control. But it will come back face up, so we get our creature back. We are Meltstrider Eulogist. I know this seems complicated, but it essentially means with Eudora in play, if we have anything that's Earthbent die, we get 2 death triggers, one from Eudora and one from Earthbend. Whichever one we want to have happen first is the one that will win. And since they are happening at the same time and we control them both, we get to decide. So if it was a creature that died, we want to bring that back as an untapped forest thanks to Eudora. If we then Earthbend that forest, when it dies, we probably want to bring it back as itself thanks to Earthbending. So it comes back face up, tapped, back as a creature. But if we want it to come back as a forest again, we sure can, because any of our non-token creatures that die come back as forests if we want them to. They are untapped, and we're all set. So yeah, Eudora gives us a way to be incredibly recursive with our Earthbent things and with our creatures, bringing them back in as creatures, which again If those creatures die and Eudora brings them back in as a forest land, that's going to trigger Landfall. If we then Earthbend it, we're able to loop it and bring it back as a creature, let that creature die again, bring it back with Eudora as a forest, Earthbend it again, and so forth. So very, very cool in this deck as a way to get so many triggers and just value our opponents into the dust. We've seen Slurk before. Slurk cares about itself or any of our creatures dying when they have 1/1 counters on them. And when that happens, we get to put a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures. And Omnath cares about our elementals, including Omnath itself dying, which lets us lightning bolt any target. Great. That is our death trigger section. Let's take a look at our outlets. These are all cards that give us the ability to put mostly our lands, but some of our other things, into the graveyard from the battlefield. So Skull Clamp, it's not really a sack outlet, but it can kill some of our things, especially if they are an X1, like any of our lands that we've Earthbent that happen to be, just have a single 1/1 counter on them. We can cause that creature to die, draw 2 cards off of it with Skull Clamp, pretty good. Cleansing Wildfire, Cycle of Renewal, Intish Restoration, Primal Growth, and Roiling Regrowth all work the same way for us, mostly. Roiling Regrowth, Cycle of Renewal, and Intish Restoration all have a sack of land. Cleansing Wildfire actually destroys a land, but we're probably going to make it our land. And Primal Growth lets us sacrifice a creature, but it's usually going to be an Earthbent land. So all of these are letting us put a land into the graveyard, and because it was probably Earthbent, or hopefully it was, it's coming right back, and then they're giving us value in the form of extra lands into play, and or a card. Nice. And of course, Disciple of Freyalise enters, and we can sacrifice any other creature. It can be an Earthbent land, it could be Toph, probably shouldn't be. It could be one of our tokens, doesn't matter. And we get some life, and we get to draw some cards. Yeah, and that's our outlets section. Let's go now to our synergy section. These are all cards that are giving us a little bit of extra ways of doing things, kind of. We've already seen 3 of them. Eudora lets us do a lot of synergistic stuff by creating that weird loop of our creatures dying, bringing them back as lands, earthbending them, letting them die, letting them come back as creatures, and so forth. Embodiment of Insight gives all of our land creatures vigilance, which is pretty solid, but also can pump up our earthbent creatures by making them into a base power and toughness of 3/3 and giving them the elemental type, at least until end of turn. And we've seen Splunking, making so all of our lands enter untapped, which is very powerful for us. What we haven't seen in this section is Ragadraga Gorgut's Boss from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. This is 2 and a red and a green for a 4/4, again, power 4 or greater, legendary human boar. He's a human and a boar. Does that mean he's just a boring human? Don't know. It says each creature you control with a mana ability gets +2/+2. Every one of our lands has a mana ability, which means any of our Earthbent lands with Ragadraga in play always get +2/+2, since they are creatures and they have mana abilities. Great. And whenever a creature we control with a mana ability attacks, we untap it. So that's not quite the same thing as Vigilance. Because if we were to say, have a 4/4, let's say it's an Earthbent land with 2 counters on it. It is therefore a 4/4, since it's a creature with a mana ability. We tap it for mana, use that mana on a spell, whatever we're doing, and then, I'm sorry, let me give a better example. Let's say we go to combat with it. It's attacking, we get to untap it, and so it's as though it had Vigilance, because after combat or during combat, we can tap it for mana. But it's also the case that if it already has Vigilance, because let's say we have Embodiment of Insight in play, we go to combat, attack with our creature with a mana ability, which is our Earthbent land. It has Vigilance, so it's still untapped, but Ragadraga is still going to trigger because it is a creature with a mana ability attacking. In response to Ragadraga's trigger, we tap our land for mana, Ragadraga will untap it, and it's still attacking. So we didn't lose out on our Vigilance, we got extra mana that we can only use during the Declare Attacker step, but we've got plenty of instants in this deck. Maybe we're attacking with an Earthbent Mountain and we want to just get an extra little bit of mana to use on a Lightning Bolt that we're about to cast during the same step. Then, if that creature has survived, we can tap it for mana again post-combat to cast any other spell. Or even tap it again right away during the Declare Attacker step and make a second mana with it to cast a spell that requires 2 mana, or 2 spells that require 1, whatever we need. Great. Also, Ragadraga says whenever we cast a spell, any spell, if at least 7 mana was spent to cast it. Okay, so maybe not any spell. Then we get to untap target creature, and that creature gets +7/+7 and trample until end of turn. So if we cast our Azuri's Predation, if we cast our Glacier Godmaw, we don't have many spells that will require us to spend 7 or more mana to cast them. But we have a couple, and when we see those come out, giving +7/+7 and trample, is that Preposterous Proportions? Something along those lines? Not really. Preposterous Proportions gives +10/+10 and vigilance to our creatures. Yeah, never mind. In any case, +7/+7 and trample means one of our creatures, hopefully one of our lands, is going to do a lot of damage to an opponent, especially if it is one of our lands, because that land is getting an additional +2/+2 already from Raga Draga, and whenever we attack with it, we get to untap it. Nice. That covers our synergy section. Let's take a look now at the section I've called extras. These are all spells that give us a little more of what we already get. Explore gives us an extra land drop during our turn. Rites of Flourishing gives everyone an extra land drop during their turn, as well as letting everyone draw an extra card. But we also have 2 cards that modify the way that our counters are put on things. Hardened Scales is the best example of them. A single green for an enchantment that says if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1 +1/+1 counters are put on it instead. So if we are Earthbending 1, we're going to put 2 counters on that creature, that land creature, because it would be 1 counter on it, but now it's an extra 1. If we were to put 3 counters on something from our Primeval Bounty effect, we cast a non-creature spell, we get to put 3 1/1 counters on something. Instead, we will put 4 with Hardened Scales in play, because it's an extra 1 every time. Very good. Loading Zone is more of a Branching Evolution variant. This is an enchantment for 3 and a green, and I'll just mention, we can warp it in for a single green. It comes in for 1 turn, it exiles itself, then we can cast it again on a later turn for 3 and a green. That does trigger Toph, since we're casting a spell, so worth considering. And it says, if 1 or more counters would be put on a creature, spacecraft, or planet, don't worry, we don't have either of those in this deck, you control, twice that many of each of these kind of counters are put on it instead. So rather than an extra counter, the way Hardened Scales gives, Loading Zone gives double counters. So if we had Primeval Bounty, putting 3 counters on something, it's going to get 6 counters instead. But what if Loading Zone and Hardened Scales are both in play at the same time? Do we put the extra counter on and then double? Or do we double and then put the extra counter? Because these are both replacement effects, and we control them both, we get to apply them in whatever order we want. So if we wanted, let's say Primeval Bounty, to put 3 counters on something, doubled to 6, and then 1 more to 7, we could do that. Or we could put the 3 counters, +1 is 4, doubled to 8. That's fine too. Usually we'll do it that way because that gives us bigger stuff, but it's up to us. And yeah, it just essentially means that if Toph is triggering to Earthbend 1 something, usually we're going to be... It doesn't really matter what order we apply these in, because 1 doubled to 2 plus 1 is 3. 1 plus 1 doubled to... No, actually it does matter. What am I saying? Good grief. Oh, goodness. Yeah, it's not actually that complicated. Just apply Hardened Scales first if you have them both, because you want your stuff to be bigger. If you don't want it to be bigger, apply Loading Zone first. Double and then 1. But usually, Toph Earthbending 1, with both of these in play, is 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. You've suddenly got a 4/4, hey, 4/4, Earthbent land, which is going to do a lot of damage. Great. That is our extras section. Let's talk now about our pump. These are all ways to pump up our creatures beyond just using the counters that we've already seen. And we've seen all of them already. Hunter's Talent's second ability, or second level, can give one of our attacking creatures +1/+0 and trample whenever we attack. Mightform Harmonizer has a landfall trigger that doubles the power of a creature we control. Raga Draga gives +2/+2 to all of our creatures with mana abilities, and can give +7/+7 and trample to one of our creatures if we cast a spell and use 7 mana or more to cast it. Embodiment of Insight can pump up our Earthbent creatures by making them into base power toughness 3/3 rather than 0/0. And Glacier Godmaw can give all of our creatures +1/+1 and vigilance every time we have a land enter with our landfall trigger. So that's our pump section. We have a little bit of burn. We've seen all of these. Lightning Bolt can hit anything for 3 damage. Sabatender does 1 damage to each opponent whenever we have land come in. So does Tannock, and Tannock can also, if it's the second time during that turn, draw us a card. And Omnath, whenever an elemental, including itself, dies, will do a Lightning Bolt wherever we send it. That's our burn. Let's talk now about our protection section. These are all cards that can help us or our creatures stay around. Claim the Kingdom. Once we get that 4th plan counter on it, we will sacrifice the enchantment and put an indestructible counter on one of our creatures, probably Toph. Collective Resistance can give one of our creatures hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Origin of Metal Bending can put a counter on one of our creatures and make it indestructible until end of turn. And Sapling Nursery can be exiled to protect our tree folk and our forests by giving them indestructible. That's all possible. Usually we won't do that. But we also have Swiftfoot Boots in this section. The Swifties are too generic for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. Haste can certainly be relevant in our deck, especially if we have a situation where we want to Earthbend a land and we also want to attack with one of the creatures that we've played this turn. So our Earthbent lands already have haste. Maybe we want to attack with a non-land, non-Earthbent creature. That's a possibility. It's also the case that our... no, I guess that's not true. Never mind. Ignore me. More importantly, though, is this hexproof. This is what's really protecting us. We want to be able to put this on Toph as soon as we can to protect her from targeted removal, because she's such an engine in this deck that lets us continually Earthbend and Earthbend and Earthbend. Protecting her with the Swiftfoot Boots is just a smart play. Yeah, so that is our protection section. Next coming up is our evasion section. These are all cards that are here to, well, help us get past our opponent's defenses. Hunter's Talent, as we just saw a moment ago, can give one of our attacking creatures +1/+0 and trample. Earthbender Ascension, once we're able to put 1/1 counters on our creatures from its landfall trigger, also gives the creatures we put those counters on trample until end of turn. And Garruk's Uprising, of course, gives all of our creatures trample all the time. And since we're here, we'll talk about this Earthbending section. I've only got this Earthbender Ascension in it to represent the fact that there is this section. As I mentioned at the top of the video, there is a considering section at the bottom of this deck list full of cards that do other things, many of which are Earthbending cards. So it's nice to be able to have spells that also Earthbend for us if we want to go harder into that. I believe that with Earthbender Ascension and mostly with Toph, we have plenty of Earthbending already happening in this deck. But if you want to do more Earthbending, then that's the place to go. So yeah, that is our evasion section and our Earthbending section. We're going to go now to our recursion section. Looking at all the ways we can get our things back. We've seen all of these as well. True Ancestry can regrow a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand. Titania lets us, when she enters, put a land from our graveyard onto the battlefield. And we've talked about all the funkiness of Eudora, letting our non-token creatures die and then come back face down as untapped forests. Pretty sweet. That's Recursion. We have a tokens section, just to point out that these are all the tokens that our deck can make. Scoot Swarm can make 1/1 insects or copies of itself, depending on how many lands we have when we are making its landfall trigger. Use Social Engineering makes us 2/2 robots with landfall. Titania lets us make a 5/3 elemental whenever our lands go to the graveyard. Primeval Bounty makes us 3/3 beasts when we cast creature spells. Rampaging Baloths makes us 4/4 beasts when we have a landfall trigger. Omnath makes us 5/5 elementals when we have landfall. Azuri's Predation makes us a number of 4/4 Phyrexian beasts equal to the total number of creatures our opponents control, and we might even get to keep some of them after they all fight. And Sapling Nursery gives us a landfall trigger to make a 3/4 green tree folk with reach every time our lands come into play. Great, that's our tokens section. I guess our last section is our lessons. I just wanted to group together, these are all the cards that happen to have the lesson type. It's not very many, but we get a lot of value from Toph anyway. Getting a little bit of extra value is pretty nice too. So Seismic Sense, Origin of Metal Bending, Shared Roots, True Ancestry, Cycle of Renewal, all lessons, as you can see from their type lines. If you want to put more lessons into this deck, whether they are Avatar The Last Airbender lessons or the original lessons from Strixhaven School of Mages, both of those would be fine, and both of them will work the same way, at least as far as Toph's second ability is concerned. And that covers all of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with our basics. We are running an awful lot of green in this deck, and not as much red. So of course, with the Avatar art lands, we're running 12 forests and 7 mountains, which is a total of 19 basics, which is totally fine for us, especially because we have a few cards that are also dual typed, like our Sheltered Thicket. This is a bicycle land. It is a mountain and a forest, so it inherently taps for red or green. It comes in tapped, but we can also cycle it for 2 generic, meaning when it's in our hand, we can pay 2 and discard it to draw a card. Something we might want to do either because it's late game and we just don't need any more lands in play. Not usually a thing we do in this deck, but it's a possibility. Or it's early game and we're desperate for card draw. Again, not usually a thing in this deck. But it could also be that we know we're going to play Titania, so we cycle Sheltered Thicket, putting it in our graveyard, then cast Titania, and when she enters, we get to put Sheltered Thicket into play off of Titania's enters trigger. So a pretty nice way to double dip with that. It's also, like I mentioned, a mountain and a forest. So if we have cards that care about the number of forests we have, like our Tree Folk enchantment that has affinity for forests, Sheltered Thicket will be counted for that. It's also counted for Rootbound Crag. This is a check land, a land that taps for red or green and enters tapped unless we control a mountain or a forest. It does not say a basic mountain or basic forest. So it will count all 19 of our basic lands, but it also counts Sheltered Thicket, because Sheltered Thicket is a mountain and a forest. I usually run these check lands in any deck where I can get at least 18 cards with the basic types that it cares about into my land base, because they're so inexpensive and they're often untapped duels in those decks. So yeah, if you were to want to upgrade this check land, Rockfall Vale is a slow land that would be fine in this deck. I might have even just put that in the deck in addition to the Rootbound Crag if it weren't a allied colored slow land, and at time of recording, we've gotten the enemy colored slow lands back into standard thanks to Secrets of Strixhaven, and so their prices have dropped, but the original allied colored slow lands from Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow are, their prices haven't dropped yet. I assume they will when Reality Fracture comes out later this year. So yeah, always a good idea to add that Rockfall Vale in later if its price is reasonable. And for Sheltered Thicket, if you wanted to upgrade it, I might recommend just Stomping Ground, the Shock land. Both the Stomping Ground and at present time Rockfall Vale are more expensive than I typically want to pay for my lands, but yeah, good options for you. We are running Bristling Backwoods. I don't usually run the crime lands, but why not? This is a land that comes in tapped, taps for both of our colors, and when it enters, it deals 1 damage to target opponent. Sure, we have a bunch of ways to get lands into play and have them come in tapped anyway. Bristling Backwoods, if it is Earthbent and dies and then is returned to the battlefield, will be entering again, so that's another bit of burn for us. Yeah, just a nice little bit of additional value every time. You could side grade this, however, into Rugged Highlands, which is the Gainland version of this. It's exactly the same, except that instead of dealing a damage to an opponent when it comes in, it gains us a life. So totally fine. You could also run that in addition to this if you wanted to. You're not getting a whole lot of value out of those things. It's usually better to have lands that are coming in untapped. But if you're going to have lands coming in tapped anyway, again, from things like Rampant Growth effects or from just returning to the battlefield thanks to Earthbending, Bristling Backwoods to do a little bit of damage, it can add up. We are running Mossfire Valley. This is a filter land. If you pay 1 mana into it and tap it, it makes red and green. So cool. It filters any mana into 1 of each of our colors, and that can be really helpful to us. So if we maybe need a little bit of extra colored mana, and we just have a land that produces colorless mana, or we've got a Soul Ring in play, we can use one of Soul Ring's mana, put it into the Mossfire Valley, and turn it into colored mana. Nice. Next up, we've got these 4 fixing lands. This is sort of the usual suite of lands I use in a deck that has green. Of course, we're running Command Tower. It's an untapped land that taps for red or green for us because it makes 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. An untapped dual land, sure, of course, we want that in our deck. We would run this if it were a tapped duel, as you've seen. Because Path of Ancestry is a tapped duel. This is a tap land with the same text as Command Tower. It makes red or green for us, and when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry 1. Which is to say, when we use Path of Ancestry's mana to cast Toph, Toph shares types with herself, so we're getting that scry. Toph is a human warrior ally. We have, in this deck, 1 ally, that's Toph, 1 warrior, that's still Toph, and we have 3 humans, one of which is Toph. So really, this only has 2 other cards in it in the deck that we will get scries off of other than our commander, but still, a tapped land that occasionally gives us a little bit of extra value is better than a tapped land that gives us no value ever. So yeah, this is at least on par with Bristling Backwoods for us. We are running Blighted Woodland. This is a fetch land, technically. We can have it come in untapped, of course, and it taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and a green, tap and sack it, and Explosive Vegetation. Search for 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. This is, I usually compare this to Myriad Landscape, which comes in tapped and only requires us to pay 2 to tap and sack it, but it has to find 2 basics that are the same type. I like this because it comes in and can tap right away for mana. It does take us a little bit longer to be able to tap and sack it, and it requires green mana to do so, but being able to do that is not terrible or difficult in this deck. And we get to find more lands, which means we're getting more of our land triggers, our landfall triggers, that is. But it's also the case that Blighted Woodland, what if we were to Earthbend this, and then pay the 3 and a green, tap and sack it? It will go to the graveyard, but sacrificing something is that thing dying, so it will come right back into play, tapped for us, thanks to Earthbending, in addition to finding us those 2 basic lands. So we can do it again next turn if we need to. Nice. Just a really fun way to, like, every turn, continually get more and more landfall triggers if we have several landfall outlet, or like sources on our battlefield. On our board, rather. And Temple of the False God is next. Not everyone's favorite land, but it's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana if we have 5 or more lands. So that's 5 including itself. So this is Acceleration, because it's a single land drop that makes 2 mana for us and doesn't cost us another land, for example. We just can't use it at all early game. So if your opening hand is like a Mossfire Valley and a Temple of the False God and no other mana sources, you probably want to mulligan. But even though Acceleration is best in the early game, it's still useful mid and late game, and Temple of the False God can do a lot for us. So, especially since we do have some spells that cost a lot, and a desire to cast a lot of spells every turn and get more value out of Toph. So this is a solid card, especially for the kind of decks that I build. We have Karplusan Forest as our Pain land. This is a untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can have it tap for a red or a green if we're willing to let it do a damage to us. We always are, because this is just very strong. The way you want to think of it this way is, do you need colored mana to cast an extra spell? If you don't, just tap it for colorless. But if you need colored mana in order to cast another spell, what that means is casting another, that means that taking that damage is the difference between you getting to play one more spell or not. So would you pay a life to cast an extra spell on your turn? I would do that every turn. Because, let's say the game lasts 10 turns, that means I essentially only had 30 life that game, but I got to cast an extra spell every single turn. That's incredibly strong. The player that plays the most spells is often the player in the lead, or that has won. So being able to tap Karplusan Forest for colored mana, even if it costs us a life in the process, totally worth it every time we have to. Just, of course, don't let it kill you, but, that's the drawback to having essentially an untapped dual land at all times. And if we don't need the colored mana, we've always got the other option to tap it for colorless. We're running Game Trail. This is a reveal land. As it enters, we can reveal a mountain or forest card from our hand, and if we don't, it comes in tapped, and then it taps for red or green. So we have so many mountains and forests, 21 different ones in this deck, so the Game Trail kind of goes along in our check land sort of area of thinking of these lands as a way to probably have this be an untapped duel most of the time. And when it's not, well, it's coming in tapped, and that's not horrible for us. If this is in our opening hand, we just play it as our first turn and don't make a 1-drop. And it's going to untap as an untapped duel, or as a dual land that second turn, and we're all set. If you were to want to upgrade this reveal land, I would suggest Thornspire Verge. It's one of the Verge lands that we got from Duskmourn and Aetherdrift. It's more likely to give us our mana. It definitely always comes in untapped. Just much more expensive since they're being played in Standard right now. Temple of Abandon is our Scry land. This is a land that comes in tapped, scries 1 when it does, and makes red or green for us. Love it. These lands are perennially reprinted. They're in Foundations right now, so they're going to be in Magic for at least a few more years, and probably get printed even beyond that. And just gives us a little bit of value in addition to being a tapped duel. That's solid. It's better even than Bristling Backwoods. And if you were to want to upgrade this to the Commercial District Surveil land, then it's even more powerful because it's got the dual types, and it surveils. And we've got a Tango land as well. This is our other dual-typed land just in our list right now. Cinderglade is a mountain and a forest, so it taps for red or green, and it comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So as long as we've got a basic mountain and a basic forest, or 2 of each, or 2 of one, or 2 of the other, 2 mountains, 2 forests, or 1 of each, all basics of course, then this is an untapped dual. If it comes in as a tap land, that's also fine, because it, like I say, is a mountain or a forest. So if it's in play, our check land is going to come in untapped, or we can reveal it from our hand, and Game Trail can come in untapped. Great. And if you wanted to upgrade that, the Shockland Stomping Grounds is the way to go. These are our utility lands. We've got quite a few of them for this deck. Ba Sing Se comes first. This is a land that comes in tapped unless we control any basic, and it taps for green, our primary color. We can also pay 2 and a green at sorcery speed and tap it to Earthbend 2. So a nice way to supplement our Earthbending. Remember, as I've said a couple of times, you can Earthbend the same land multiple times just to keep putting more counters on it. Sometimes Ba Sing Se is a great way to do that. So yeah, pretty solid for us in this deck, especially with as much of the adventures as we saw with Toph in Ba Sing Se. Demolition Field is next. I gave a little bit of my Demolition Field speech when we talked about Cleansing Wildfire. Usually, players at the tables who are playing my kinds of decks aren't looking for land destruction, but you have to be able to answer a problematic non-basic every so often, and having a single, or I guess in this deck, 2 sources of ways to do that in the form of Cleansing Wildfire, which is really meant for our lands, but you don't have to use them for it, is fine. Especially if that source is Demolition Field, which is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and then that opponent gets to search their library for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither they nor we are down a land, assuming of course we had basics left in our library, but we did get rid of whatever land was threatening us or preventing us from executing our game plan that they had in play. So sweet. You can definitely use Demolition Field on non-basics that will take someone off of a color, and that's not really what most people are looking for. And if you're playing it in a competitive sense, maybe that's helpful to you. Not usually these kind of decks for competitive games, but you know, you're the pilot. Go for it. Next up is Emergence Zone. This is a land that if we tap, we make colorless mana, or we can pay 1, tap, and sack it, and we can cast spells this turn as though they had flash. What's especially nice about Emergence Zone is that means we can cast our spells on our opponent's turns and thereby do more Earthbending with Toph, thanks to her trigger, on those opponent's turns. Being able to have sudden surprise spells, because we have flash, is very strong. Being able to have surprise spells that all come with creatures, by us Earthbending our lands in the process, is even stronger. And, as I mentioned before, with another of our sack lands with Blighted Woodland, Emergence Zone, just like Demolition Field, we can get it back simply by Earthbending it, and then activating its ability, and it will come back in tapped under our control thanks to Earthbending. That's pretty sweet. Especially nice to be able to have essentially a 1/1 creature that taps for mana, and that we can pay 1, tap, and sack to give all of our spells flash until end of turn, and when we do that, it comes back in as a tapped non-creature land. Very cool. High Market is next. This is a land, comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can tap it and sack a creature to gain a life. This is just if we really need to trigger any of our death triggers or our landfall triggers. High Market lets us sacrifice our Earthbent lands. Gaining a life off of it is fine, but really we're here just to be able to have a free sacrifice outlet. Free in the sense that it's just costing us tapping this land. So that's pretty solid. Adds to our outlets. Kessid Wolfrun is next. We are in red and green, so we might as well run this. It's a land that we can tap for colorless, comes in untapped, or we can pay X, a red and a green, and tap it to give one of our creatures, or any of our opponent's creatures, plus X plus O, and trample until end of turn. So there's lots of value we can get from this. For example, X can be 0. So for a single red, a single green, and tapping this, we can give anything just trample until end of turn. That's awesome when we have big creatures, But we can also spend mana into the X and pump that creature up. But it's especially nice when we use this on an opponent's turn. We make it so either we've made a deal with an opponent to pump up their creature and give it trample in order to get them to make an attack, or even more fun, when an opponent chooses to make an attack knowing they're going to get blocked and they're not going to get as much damage through as they wanted, we can surprise them by targeting their creature and either giving it trample, if it didn't already have it, or giving it a power boost plus trample when no one at the table thought we were going to. Of course we can, like I said, do this politically, make a deal for it, but we can also surprise someone, and sometimes that just kills an opponent. Not the opponent who controls the creature we're targeting, but a different opponent who was also our opponent. So yeah, Kessig Wolfrun can be used in that same way that you might use like Rogue's Passage in some political decks, or in decks where you're expecting to be able to sneak in, and you can sneak an opponent's creature in. Adding a little bit of evasion and a little bit of pump can go a long way on opponent's creatures, but of course we can use it on our own as well. Next up, we have Lindblum Industrial Regency. This is one of the Final Fantasy adventure lands. So this is a land, a town, that enters tapped and taps for red. That's all it does. Except that it also has an adventure built onto it. If you haven't seen adventures before, this is a spell that is on this card. We can either play this card as just a land, which means we ignore the spell, or we can cast Mage Siege, which is an instant speed adventure, for 2 and a red, that makes a 0/1 black wizard creature token with, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this deals 1 damage to each opponent. So a little pinger, that's fine. And after we cast the adventure, this land goes into exile, and we can then play it as the land from exile. Sort of like Warp, but it doesn't wait until the end step to go to exile, and we don't have to wait until a later turn to play it from exile. Assuming we still have a land drop to make this turn, we can cast Mage Siege, triggering Toph, and then, and of course making our little token, then this card goes to exile and we can play Lindblum as a tapped red source as our land drop for the turn. Pretty good. Just note, you cannot cast Mage Siege unless this card is in your hand. Once it's in play as a land, that adventure is no longer available to you, unless you somehow bounce the land back to your hand. I'll just skip ahead a little bit because we also have Xenarch Land, Ancient Metropolis. This is the other Final Fantasy adventure land in the deck. It works the same way as the other one. It comes in tapped, taps for green as the town land, but also it has this sorcery, Lasting Faith. I, again, don't know Final Fantasy, so I don't know why it's spelled this way. Yeah, maybe it's relevant. Anyway, this is a sorcery adventure that for 4 and double green lets us make a 1/1 colorless hero creature token and then put a 1/1 counter on it for each land we control, which could mean a very huge token. Pretty sweet for us. Notably, it's not just the case that this gives us, a land that also has a spell, which puts counters on something and makes us a token, but this is another spell in our deck that isn't taking up a spell slot, it's taking up a land slot. That spell, like I said, triggers Toph. So we're getting more Earthbending, even though this is just a land card in our deck. And the same is true for Lindblum. Pretty nice. Mosswort Bridge also gives us that value. This is a land with Hideaway 4, which says when it enters, we look at the top 4 of our library, exile one of those cards face down, and we can put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And then Mosswort Bridge is a tap land that taps for green. And if our creatures have a total combined power of 10 or greater, we can pay a green and tap Mosswort Bridge to play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So the way we want to do this is have Mosswort Bridge come in, look at the top 4, find the best spell among them, tuck it under Mosswort Bridge, and at some point, Earthbend Mosswort Bridge. That's not necessary, but we can, because when we do that, we're adding to the total power of the creatures we have in play. Then once this is untapped, as long as we have a total power of 10 or greater among all of our creatures, including Mosswort Bridge, we pay a green and tap Mosswort Bridge, and we get to cast that spell that's underneath it. At that point, Mosswort Bridge stays in play. It's still a land that taps for green, and it's still a land that has a counter on it, and is a creature, thanks to Earthbending. So then, we attack with it, we block with it, we do whatever we want with it, and let it die. We get whatever death triggers that we might have, whatever landfall triggers we might have from it coming back into play, and when it comes back into play, it will hide away again. So we're going to get another spell under it, hopefully, and be able to probably more quickly, even though it comes in tapped. Next turn, when it untaps, we can probably do this ability again right away and get that spell. It's not free, since we're spending a green and tapping Mosswort Bridge, which is essentially paying 2 mana, but it's giving us whatever spell we may have found of those 4, and we're going to get to do that every time we cycle Mosswort Bridge through our little loop this way. Pretty nice. And remember, those spells are already in our deck, but they will trigger Toph as well. And finally, we've got the Secret Tunnel. I'm not going to sing the song, but it's a great one. It is the cave I mentioned that we have. So our Splunking, if we have this in play, or in our hand when we play Splunking, if we put this into play with Splunking's Enters trigger, we'll gain 4 life. This is a land that can't be blocked. So this is a land that is meant to be Earthbent, because if we Earthbend this, it's a creature, we can attack with it, and it says it can't be blocked. Pretty good. But we can also tap it for colorless, and we can pay for and tap it, and 2 target creatures we control that share a creature type can't be blocked this turn. Now I know you've seen before, we don't have a whole lot of creatures that all share types. We have a few scouts, a few druids, but we have a bunch of elementals in the form of things like Omnath and Titania. But more importantly, those elementals make elementals. They make tokens that have the elemental type. We also have beasts. We have 1 beast in this deck, but it's Rampaging Balos, which makes beast tokens. So we have lots of different ways to take advantage of Secret Tunnel's ability to make 2 of our creatures that share a type unblockable. We can't use this on our lands that are Earthbent, because they don't have a creature type. They are just become creatures without a type. But if we have our elemental that can, with Landfall, make one of our lands into a 3/3 elemental until end of turn, then now that's an elemental. We can just choose that and another elemental, and those are unblockable this turn. Pretty all right. Secret Tunnel, its last ability is maybe going to be used in some games, but mostly we care about the fact that it's a land that we can Earthbend and that it can't be blocked. Neat. And that sums it up. Again, thanks to NickVol_ for requesting this commander, as well as for waiting for me to fit it into this monthly rotation of request decks. If you would like to see me build around a particular commander, and you are the patient sort, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic, and you can make a request of your own. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Like I said, consider joining my Patreon, patreon.com/secondmonitormagic, or becoming a member on this YouTube channel. And remember that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.